course, back in those days, the mentality was, suck it up and get back at it, get back on the horse, and I didn't know any better. So that's what I did. So,
and obviously you had to go talk to the department approved psychiatrist.
Correct. Yes.
Did what everyone else has probably ever done. I'm perfectly fine. I'm good to go.
Walked in there, pounded my chest. Oh yeah, I'm good. And I got to admit, because I did have some life experience prior to law enforcement, that I did have a different kind of an outlook on some things, and the way I survived that mentally and emotionally was just the fact that I survived it. It wasn't me pounding my chest because I took a life or anything else. It was, I took all these things on board, joining the community, all these kinds of things. When the call came to step up and save my own life, I had the capability to do that. And for me, that was probably the easiest way for me to justify having to survive a major critical incident. So.
And in going back to your book, you start talking about some of the things you were experiencing after that shooting. Mm-hmm. And now that you've got time between then and now, looking back on it, they were triggers.
Yep. Oh, yes.
And for you to get to a point to acknowledge them at that time, did you see them as triggers, or how is it coming into your head as how you were processing it?
It was actually pretty simple, as it turns out. And I do talk about that a lot with my speaking stuff, because it was very easy, and it worked out just perfectly, because back on the very first day back, probably second or third, fourth call of the day, whatever it is, was really busy that particular day for whatever reason. And I respond to a suspicious vehicle call in an apartment complex. And as it turned out, I happened to just be really close by, which is always my way, because being the resident ship magnet, but whatever, I know about that already. So I show up on this call, and I make the decision to go ahead and approach the car for whatever reason. And it was the exact same manner as it had been, 10 days prior or whatever it was. And when I walked up to the window, the day, it was actually July 15th when the shooting occurred, July 15th all came right back at me. I was like, whoa, hang on. And I didn't quite make it to the car. And I took a couple steps back, and I realized that, man, I've just been confronted with something, whatever it was. I didn't really understand the dynamic of it.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this. You do that intermittent fasting?
I'm trying to, yeah.
How's that working for you?
It's actually working pretty good, yeah. And I'm trying to get back into shape and working out because, side note to the whole thing, I'm actually going back to Fresno for the basic waiver course, and I'm going to go apply for Harbor Police.
Working out's overrated.
I agree. This is why I look like this, and I like you. So
it's all smoke and mirrors on this side. Trust me. So we're eventually going to get into your book, and that is going to have some basis for our questions. But before we go deep into that, talk to me about the young Chris Hoyer.
Born in 1969 in New Hampshire, of all places. And I'm not 100% sure I wasn't really born on the lawn of Woodstock, because my mom, God bless her, it's, the age of Aquarius and all that kind of crazy stuff. And the good part is she's a rock star. I just love her to death. The bad part is because of where I was born and grew up, we had a Navy base on one end of town and an Air Force base on the other end of town. And you can kind of see where that's going. So she's probably a military groupie of sorts, which is, leads to my next story about my real father, who I'm still searching for. So what I do know is he was Marine Force Recon, got deployed to Vietnam in probably 68-ish, 69, give or take, somewhere in that range. Never to be heard from again. Unfortunately, my mom, being that she was a 22-year-old kid, and God only knows what kind of whatever she was on at that particular time, can't remember the whole story about what their relationship was back in the day. So not high school sweethearts, not somebody she had grown up with. Nothing like that. I don't even know that I wasn't a one-night stand, which, okay, fine, whatever. It does lead into, because I do know that he was in the Marines, it does lead to some of the path that I took, if you will, particularly in the law enforcement community, but I am first-generation law enforcement, so. So born in New Hampshire, and then she met another Air Force guy, and he ended up taking me on as my stepdad, which is kind of a really funny story. I ended up moving back with him in 1984 after my mom kicked me out of the house. So 14 years old, I'm being a pain in the ass kid, and she's like, you need to go live with your father.
But you also talk about this in the book too. Your mom and stepdad didn't actually work out, so they actually separated when you were pretty young,
2 years old.
But yet he still stayed in your life fairly significantly as a father figure.
He did, yeah, and he was fantastic. The strange part about that, and I mean, there's no secret about it. I probably should be on Oprah with my upbringing because no father. My mom's black, of course. When they see the video, they'll see that I'm white, or half white or half blood, whatever you want to call it. So she kicks me out of the house at 14. We'd been living in Virginia since about 1980, so a few years down there. Kicks me out when I'm 14. I'll go back to live with my stepdad in ultra crazy conservative New Hampshire, the backwoods of nowhere, and he's a gay guy, as it turns out, which was why they got divorced, which is a whole nother conversation. So now here I am, a 14-year-old boy living with two dudes in the middle of the woods, and that was, they made it very easy for me, thank goodness. But it was pretty awkward as a kid, because my buddies come over and they're like, hey, what's going on, and you try to explain it, but you really can't at that age. You just want to blow it off. But that was short-lived, unfortunately, because then at 18, my dad ended up kicking me out of the house, which was probably, as it turned out, my latest traumatic event, if you will. So my girlfriend, Natalie, God bless her.
But he did it, and you talk about it in the book, he did it very gently. That breakfast conversation of pay or get out, and literally it was, all right, I'm packing my bag and go.
Yeah, and, you're probably just like me. I mean, at that age, you don't defy your parents. I didn't anyways. I mean, it was like they say and I do, and that was what it was. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to be homeless now and living in my car for several weeks, high school dropout, and all the bad stuff that came with that, of course. And just, the shame of it all and trying to survive and not having any money. And it was pretty rough. So
that period between 14 and 18. So your mom you guys were living in Virginia. Your mom sent you to live with your dad in New Hampshire. What was your relationship like with your mom post being kicked out?
It was fine. It was cool. My whole thing is still to this day, when I send her a text message or a call, it's usually the exact same message. Hey, just checking in. And from, a young age, that's what I did with her because I was a latchkey kid. I got to just run the streets. And she said, as long as you just check in, let me know you're okay from time to time. You can not do whatever you want, but that's pretty much what I did, which, of course, led me to the trouble that I got into. So,
at what age did you guys move from? So when you were first born, you guys were living in New Hampshire?
Correct, yes.
At what age did you move down to Virginia?
When I was about 10.
And was that to be closer to her family?
No, that was the other third now military guy that she met that had family.
She's got a type.
There. She does. She totally does. Yeah, which is strange. Unfortunately, now she's been single since 1981-ish because we got down there. And you got to remember, my upbringing, single black mother in the deep south of the white kid just didn't fly that well back in those days. And so she got a lot of grief and a lot of shunning from that whole situation. So made it very uncomfortable for both of us.
I was going to say, what was the impact on you going to school? And
It was strange for me, but Virginia back in those days was still very very diverse culturally. So, but it was just strange for a lot of other folks because you've got an entire black family or an entire white family. There weren't that many mixed families back in the day, at least not where we lived. I mean, I'm sure there probably were, but so for us, it was a little bit strange because we were in a foreign land, so to speak,
right.
Strangers and not really being accepted. So for me, it was awkward, but I hadn't really known any other kind of a life. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll just take it on board, and I did. So
your mom have any other children?
Nope, I'm the only one. So.
And in that time from when you guys went down to Virginia, did you still stay in contact with your stepdad back in New Hampshire?
I did, yeah. Yeah, he had actually, he left New Hampshire back at about the same time they got divorced and moved to California and stayed out there until the early 80s and then moved back to New Hampshire. And then, of course, fast forward a couple more years and I moved up there with him and as a new partner.
So you alluded to you were kind of getting into some trouble when your mom kicked you out at 14. When did the path start to change for you? When did you start kind of becoming a problem child?
I remember very specifically, oddly that you asked that. I was on my bicycle and I roll up to this basically like a playground area, and I see two sets of kids over here to the left, and I see sets of kids to the right. And I knew the ones that on the left were kind of like the well-to-do types, and a little more higher up, if you will, in the food chain. And the other guys were what I call more my speed, more the kids that were kids I could probably get along with. As it turned out, the one...
troublemakers, no troublemakers.
Well, yeah, if you want to say it that way. I wasn't going to say it, but yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And I didn't know any of them. I just knew, based on the bicycles they were riding and the clothes they were wearing and this kind of stuff, I could just kind of tell them, like, I'm not going to really fit in with this crowd over here. I'll go for these guys. And still to this day, the one kid is still a friend of mine, and he was a troublemaker big time. And we got into a fair amount of trouble as kids. The one big one was we were at his house. His neighbor kid stole his bicycle. And when we saw the family leave, we went in there and broke into their shed to find a bike and got caught, which was completely innocent as it turned out, but we ended up getting popped for it. And I ended up doing community service I think I was 12 or 13 at the time, just approaching the trouble time. And then fast forward about a year or so later, we're out with the same kid, and it's his sister who's an adult and her adult boyfriend. We all go out. We're going to go to the mall. Turned out we ended up staying out all night. And it was truly, my mom still doesn't believe me, it was truly just an innocent night of cruising, And of course, I get home and I lie. I'm like, oh, no, we went over here. And she drives us to this guy's house and knocks on this door. And she's like, I'm taking you to jail. And he's like, hey, man, because he agreed to lie for us.
Right.
And then when she told him all that, he's like, no, this never happened. All right, so what really happened? So we told her, and she, again, still doesn't believe me. And that was the time when she's like, you're going to live with your dad. So I'm like, and that was when I was about 14, so yeah.
Up to that point, were you, as far as like school, were you a good student? Were you even interested in school?
I hated school. I still have, it's kind of funny because I've got a whole bunch of movies. Like I'm a DVD guy still. And I've still got
better than a VHS.
True, yeah, that's true. I'd probably still have those too if I still had a machine. But I've got a whole bunch of movies from my childhood that I call my skip school movies because I hated going to school because I was unpopular, very awkward, especially as a preteen, all these kinds of things. So I had these back in the day when we only had Cinemax and HBO. We'd get those promos from time to time, and one of those movies would come on, and I'd fake being sick, so I could watch that movie. And I mean, the big picture was because I didn't have to go to school. Man, my mom mostly fell for it, but after a while, she's like, all right, now you're going. So I was not a very good student. In fact, my senior year, because I was such a popular kid my junior year, by the time my senior year rolled around, I had a full boat of classes, 7 full classes, and I never made it past month 4, I think it was, when I got booted out. So it's like, yeah.
What about sports?
I was big into sports, but because I was a D-ish student.
Could never make the team?
Could never make the team.
Or at least eligibility?
I was on the baseball team for a while, basketball team for a little while, but then my grades started to slip, and that was one of the things, probably still is to this day, that, hey, if you're not holding up your grades, you're done. So that's exactly what happened to me, which really sucked because I was actually a pretty good baseball player. So,
what kind of work did your mom do?
She was, she had a bunch of Joe jobs, mostly back in the day. When she finally found her calling, she ended up being like a social worker type person where she was involved with the men's shelters, stuff like that. And just based on her upbringing, so to speak, she was really good at being able to bring out folks and help them with whatever their crisis happens to be. So
working with you as a young kid causing her problems was on the job training.
I'm sure she learned a lot from you, probably what not to do, but more than anything. So.
And in your book, you talk about this, and you've already mentioned it. So you never met your biological dad. Have you tried to find him?
I have, yeah. But unfortunately, since they were never married, you know what that means. And he was in the Marine Corps. I've reached out to the Marine Corps several times, and they're like, you're not really technically family, if you will, because you weren't married, so we can't give you any info. Oh my God. And I've done the background investigations. I've done the popular, lineage things.
Ancestry.com and that.
Correct. Yeah. And I've found like one second cousin, I think, and that's about as close as I've ever gotten. So
where do you think geographically he ended up?
It's funny you say that too, because I know from what she's told me, he was actually born and raised in Riverside here, close to where we are right now, which is strange, which probably is another reason why I ended up in California. Which, by the way, nobody moves to California except my girlfriend and I. So yeah, we actually did.
Well, in 2023, nobody does.
Yeah, no way. So, It's kind of funny. I got to just mention this really quick. So my girlfriend does this thing called Nothing But Love Notes, and I'll talk more about that as we go. But her big thing is a Vietnam veteran. She loves the Vietnam vets. And so the big joke is every time we give a note to a Vietnam vet, the question is, are you my dad? So she said, you got to stop doing that. But I think it's funny because, what else can I do? I can't have anything but a sense of humor about it.
Right.
It is what it is. So, and I hope that he made it back. For all I know, he could have been killed in action. Who even knows? But hopefully someday maybe he'll hear this and be like, hey, are you my son? So,
and we're going to get to this down the road and some of the trauma that you've dealt with. But as it relates to not knowing your biological dad, do you think that has any impact or has had any impact on your life? I
think it had a huge impact, but in a positive way, because I recognized that it was just me and my mom, single mom, most of my life, and until, living with my dad, which was awkward. Again, they made it easy for me. But when I met my now ex, she had a kid at the time, and all I wanted to do was be the best father that I could. And then when I had one with her together, same kind of a thing. I just wanted to make sure that they grew up in a different kind of environment than I did. Not that it wasn't bad at all by any stretch. There's just parts missing, those links that you really desperately need. Like in my mom's case, so she's like, you need a male influence because clearly I'm not making it happen for you. And that's when I got booted. I wanted both of my kids to have that male influence along as with the female influence as well. So.
The second stepdad that came into your mom's life, what was your relationship like with him?
Oh man, I'd love to meet him someday. He was I'll just say this, he was not a nice person. I can't tell you how many times I've been awoken in the middle of the night to hear screaming going on. I come down and he's got her pinned on the floor, choking her out. And I'm like, dude, no. And at the time when I was probably 11, when they got together, what can you do as an 11-year-old kid?
Right.
He's obviously a big Air Force muscle guy, what am I going to be able to do to stop that? Except for stab him in the back, which clearly I didn't do. But he basically just did not treat us very well, unfortunately. When we were in New Hampshire together, because that's where they met, things seemed to be going fine. As soon as we got back to his element with his friends and family, everything just kind of fell apart, and it didn't work out. So
was he active duty the entire time?
He was active duty when we met, and then I don't remember, he was an MP, and I only remember that because he'd bring me over to the base and we'd walk around and see at the time the brand new F-15s, which I thought was the greatest thing in the world. And then I'm pretty sure he just took an early retirement at 4 or 5 years or whatever it was. So.
Coming towards the end of high school, you said that your senior year you were loaded on classes but just never went. Right. Did you end up graduating, or did you have to go back and get a GED?
I went back in 96 and got my GED.
So what year would you have graduated had you graduated?
1988.
And at that time in your life, did you have a plan for your future?
I had no plan. The only thing that I look back on, and I realize now more as an adult, of course, that I never had a quit attitude. I always had a no quit attitude because I knew that I had to survive. I can't give up. If I give up, then what's going to happen then? So, and I always had, close contacts with friends and stuff like that. So if I need to take a shower or something like that, they'd let me come over, when they were at school or whatever, this kind of stuff. So, I say it was homeless, and it truly was, but it really wasn't as bad as it from what I've seen and what you've seen out on the street. I was never that destitute, if you would. So
homeless in a very loose definition, in the sense that you just didn't have a consistent place to go back to.
Correct. Yes.
And so what was because you didn't go into law enforcement right away. You actually had quite a bit of an adult life. So what did you start doing?
Well, I kind of a similar thing. I had some Joe jobs as a kid, went back and forth. I met a guy that was a carpet installer when I moved out to Arizona with my, at the time, girlfriend. And so between what
was that experience like, moving from New Hampshire to Arizona?
It was, I left when my dad kicked me out of the house. We moved out to Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Stayed there for a while, struggling, I was couch surfing for about a year before I finally got my act together. Got a decent paying job, which was like a Joe job, Domino's Pizza kind of a thing. Met a girl, and she had family out in Arizona. And so about 2 years into our relationship, we moved out there. So it was from New Hampshire to Virginia to New Hampshire to Virginia to Arizona. So it was kind of strange, bouncing around quite a bit, of course. So when I got to Arizona, I met this guy, and he ended up being a carpet installer, as it turns out. And I was kind of bounced between, nothing jobs. I mean, I was working for Airborne Express was the longest job I had as a younger, 21, 22-year-old kid, basically. And that was paying the bills. It was cool. It wasn't something I was going to do for the rest of my life. I knew that. I knew I had a bigger calling or a bigger purpose.
Did you have anything in mind of what you wanted to get to? You just knew there was something else meant for you.
Something was waiting for me. I just didn't know what it was, and I was struggling to catch up because my girlfriend, I thought I was head over heels in love with her. About 6 weeks after we moved to Phoenix, she's like, "Oh, I met this other guy. I'm out of here." Well, thanks a lot, for that. So I went into a pretty deep depression for a little while, clawed my way back out of that. And then I started working with my friend. He ended up moving in with me for a while after she moved out, of course, needed somebody to help pay the bills. And so I started going working with him a little bit. And then it turned out I was just a natural at doing the carpet thing. I'm like, okay. So I did that for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years at the most. And then decided that, I can do this on my own. I don't need to have somebody else paying me. At the time when I started, I was making $40 a day. And then when I became an actual installer, I was making $75 a day. And I thought, well, I can just do this on my own. Why do I need to, go through these other channels? So that's exactly what I did. I started my own company when I was 23, and it exploded. It was unbelievable. I'm like, wow. I was the first year, bought a brand new car, started taking vacations. It was fantastic. At the time I was doing that was when I met my now ex. And so that was a good transition to having the business, meeting the girl, having now like being instantly a father kind of a thing after we started getting close and so forth. But a couple of years into that, I realized I'm like, it's honorable work. It is, it's good. It's construction. It's very, very hard, very taxing on my body. It dawned on me one day that, am I going to be doing this when I'm 40, rolling around in carpet, and doing all this crazy stuff. And
Arizona is so comfortable in the middle of the summer as far as temperature.
Man, I tell you, and some of these new house builds that we're in, when there's literally like a shell and, they got the walls and stuff like that, but nothing else. They don't have air conditioning or electricity or anything. And you're in there laying carpet for 12 hours or whatever it is, and again, I just did it for the money, but no, I'm kidding. But, so I was doing this job for this guy, as it turns out, which I'm sure you read this part of the story, and turned out he was part of another agency with the law enforcement community. And I had no idea. I had zero experience with anything related to law enforcement.
Was he doing carpet as a side hustle at that time?
No, he was a homeowner, and he called me for a job. So I showed up at his house, and I did the job. And what I didn't know, the reason why the job became available to me, so to speak, if you will, was that another agency outside of Phoenix had served a search warrant on his house. Of course, he's not living there. He's a renter, right, basically, or a rentee or whatever you want to call it. And so Glendale, Arizona PD shows up. They throw a flashbang at his front door, burns up the front carpet, so he needs that fixed. So he calls me up, hey, can you fix this? Oh, yeah. So I go out there and I do the job. And when I get through with the first intro, I had already sent a couple guys out there to do some scouting for me, and I'm like, okay, we need to do some measurements and all this other stuff. And he, when I showed up for the first time in person, he goes, "Where's your boss?" I'm like, well, "That's me." He goes, "Well, these other guys they're like 50 years old, right?" He's like, "And you're in charge?" I go, "Yeah." So I had a long story short, I'm doing the job. He's just fascinated with the amount of work and the pride that I took and how I'm able to get the guys that are working for me to do the right thing, the proper way and stuff. And at the end of it all, he goes, "You ever thought about being a cop?" And I'm like, "No." He goes, "You're a great individual. You should try out." I'm like, "Okay." That was it. That was literally the reason I decided to go into it. Started looking into it. This was 96, and started doing the background stuff, figuring out what I needed to do. And of course, then I start getting in shape, start running and stuff like that. And it's funny because the very first time I ever tried to run since I, was in high school, mile and a half, and at the time it was 12 minutes and 51 seconds, which was in my brain for that entire time training. 12:51. All I got to do is make it 12:51 and I'm good. First time I ever ran.
There's no extra points for 12:50.
No, it wasn't. Exactly, right? And 12:52 you're done. Come back in 6 weeks, which happened several times too, which is, kind of a part of the story too. But the very first time I ever ran, I ended up falling down and throwing up in somebody's front driveway. I'm like, man, I'm not sure if I'm cut out for this. Fast forward, got through all the stuff, did the whole background investigation and all that kind of stuff, started doing the testing, and got hired on in December of 97.
And you were how old at this point?
I was 27 when I got hired on. So,
and you've mentioned that you had connections to the military as a kid growing up. Any law enforcement in any way around you through friends or anything like that?
Except for my mom's ex-boyfriend. He was an MP, but I didn't even know what that was. All I knew was he walked around with a rifle and he was out on the flight line, basically.
So did the military or law enforcement even kind of pique your radar as a young boy or at all?
It totally did, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I got to go back and tell the story. When I was living with my dad up in New Hampshire, he lived in, Podunk, middle of nowhere. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning one night, and 2 F-15 pilots broke the sound barrier, which was like the biggest news ever for where we live. I mean, that was on the news for weeks. And when I started looking at what those guys did, I'm like, wow, 25,000 pounds of thrust between your legs, and your title is fighter pilot? How can you go wrong? So I went down to the recruiter's office, and I said, hey, sign me up. I want to fly planes. And they're like, yeah, it takes a little bit more than that there, kid. Not only that, but I was wearing corrective lenses at the time, still do. And they're like, yeah, you can't fly with, unless you've got anything better than 20/20 or even 20/15 vision. And I'm like, what? Come on. So I never went back, which was probably the one regret of my life that I have as a kid, that had I known what I know now, I would have probably gone in and probably would have done okay. Or had I been introduced to special forces back in the day, that would have probably been my path. But I guess God had other plans for me. So
the story changes in 1997. You're now a police officer.
Yep.
And in your book, and a good 2/3 of it are some interesting stories that you experienced over your 20-year career, a little more than 20 years.
20 years and 64 days, yes.
Where I want to go to with it is you had 2 very significant incidents in your career. You had your first shooting, and where I'm more interested in is the after effects, especially the mental health part of it. But just briefly, what was that, the first shooting, how it kind of came about?
That one was, as it turned out, looking back on it, yeah, of course it's a big deal. In the grand scheme of things, I had 2 years on, and it was a simple radio call, get out there, and fast forward, basically the guy stole a car, got into a pursuit with another precinct area, crashed his car, runs. That's the call that I get. I find out now, when responding to the call, the guy has now run into a neighborhood carrying a gun. I'm like, okay, well, that steps it up a little bit, of course. Find the guy inside of a car, giving him commands. He doesn't want to come out. So the only thing I can do at the time, because I was still pretty inexperienced. I had, 4 months of academy training and 5 weeks of post, and then 2 years of street training. And I was still learning my way big time, huge. And so I didn't really have a whole lot of, tactical background at that point in time. I knew the really basic stuff. So
the one thing that jumped out at me, though, when you're telling the story in the book, is you had instincts, natural instincts that ultimately helped you and made you a good cop of your career. But you started thinking in the bigger picture of, okay, he was last seen here or reported to be in A. Where might he go? And that's what kind of took you to a shopping center. And you were in, as odd as it sounds, you were trying to think like a criminal and like, where would I go?
Well, that's funny you say that, because being not a criminal as a kid, but being, pretty crafty and knowing how to, get away with stuff, if you want to use that word. I kind of had a better idea of what I would do if I was a bad guy, where would I go? And basically what that did was just led me down the most likely path of travel. And so that's exactly what I did. And in addition to that, the mental part that really saved my life dozens and dozens and dozens of times was playing that what if game, And so what if this and what if this? And then when it came to actually having to pull the trigger, I had gone through that what if scenario like at least 100 times prior to, and then when it was time to get it on, I was already way ahead of the curve, if you will. So having that mindset already preset in my tactics daily was what saved my life, guaranteed, no questions asked. So,
and your ability to deliver a roundhouse kick to the side window.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny story. And at graduation, I was about 140 pounds. And so this is a Cadillac that we're talking about here. And trying to be crafty and be smart, I decided to kick the window of the car because my patrol car's on the other side of the building. I can't get to it. Nobody knows where I'm at.
And he's basically trying to steal a second car so he can get out of the area.
Correct. Right. Yeah. He's got a big straight slotted throwing knife in his left hand. He's smashing his column, and I can't see where the gun is inside the front seat. It's a bench seat type style car. And so what I'm trying to do is create a diversion. I wish I would think, I would like to think that I was forward thinking doing that, but I really wasn't. I was just trying to create a distraction and kind of eliminate that barrier, if you will, between us, because he's only 3 feet away, inside the car, and he's looking right at me, full uniform, broad daylight. It's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and so there's no question he knows I'm there, and I'm giving him commands. He's not paying, and he's like, yeah, whatever, dude, get out of here, you skinny little tweaker looking kid. You're not gonna touch me. So I decided to start kicking the window, but I used my left foot, so I didn't shoot my toe off because I was trying to be smart, which didn't work. 2 times. Went up there, I kicked the window, and I go back to retreat for some cover, which I didn't even have. Go back up second time, kick the window a second time, doesn't work. Now I can hear the car starting to crank up a little bit because he's now broken the column, getting his finger into the manipulation device. So I go back up the third time, smash the window with my right foot, which causes him to kind of shield his body. And that knife, I see the knife go out of his left hand, and he reaches over with his right hand, and the gun gets probably 2/3 up, pointing in my direction. And it was one of those things where, I'm like calling for my mom, I'm like screaming, close my eyes and just kind of pray sort of a thing. And, I'm a tactical instructor, so I understand the whole dynamic of, front sight picture, smooth trigger press and all that. That was not what it was. It was like, let's just hope to God that we just hit the guy. So I fired 2 rounds. The first round went into his arm, straight through his arm bone into his heart, and he was pretty much done right on the spot. Second round, it was a double tap basically. So that second round went about 4 inches lower and caught the door of the car and basically stopped the round inside the door. So I'm like, ah. So it was funny because the investigators, when I asked them, they're like, well, I guess it looks all right. Like, yeah, thanks a lot. So
going forward from that, you're obviously your first legitimate OIS.
Right.
How much time off was imposed upon you after that?
Technically 3 days. And I joke about it. I even then, when I was a kid, young, stupid rookie, I said, well, it was my Monday when I got into shooting. So my 3 days had just rolled around. I get into shooting. So my 3 days off for work, the transition period from the critical incident to 3 days, that's what it used to be back in the day. And then my weekend rolled back around. So I technically got 8.5 days off, if you will. So it's a bad joke, but I'm like, shoot somebody, shoot them on your Monday. That way you get all the extra time off. So it was technically 3 days. That's what Phoenix did for their officers back in the day, which it really wasn't enough. Of course, back in those days, the mentality was, suck it up and get back at it, get back on the horse, and I didn't know any better. So that's what I did. So,
and obviously you had to go talk to the department approved psychiatrist.
Correct. Yes. Did
what everyone else has probably ever done. I'm perfectly fine. I'm good to go.
Walked in there, pounded my chest. Oh yeah, I'm good. And I got to admit, because I did have some life experience prior to law enforcement, that I did have a different kind of an outlook on some things. And the way I survived that mentally and emotionally was just the fact that I survived it. It wasn't, me pounding my chest because I took a life or anything else. It was, I took all these things on board, joining the community, all these kinds of things. When the call came to step up and save my own life, I had the capability to do that. And for me, that was probably the easiest way for me to justify having to survive a major critical incident. So.
And in going back to your book, you start talking about some of the things you were experiencing after that shooting. Mm-hmm. And now that you've got time between then and now, looking back on it, they were triggers.
Yep. Oh, yes.
And for you to get to a point to acknowledge them, at that time, did you see them as triggers, or how was it coming into your head as how you were processing it?
It was actually pretty simple, as it turns out. And I do talk about that a lot with my speaking stuff, because it was very easy, and it worked out just perfectly because back on the very first day back, probably second or third, fourth call of the day, whatever it is, was really busy that particular day for whatever reason. And I respond to a suspicious vehicle call in an apartment complex. And as it turned out, I happened to just be really close by, which is always my way because being the resident ship magnet, but whatever, I know about that already. So I show up on this call and I make the decision to go ahead and approach the car for whatever reason. And it was the exact same manner as it had been, 10 days prior or whatever it was. And when I walked up to the window, the day, it was actually July 15th when the shooting occurred, July 15th all came right back at me. I was like, whoa, hang on. And I didn't quite make it to the car. And I took a couple of steps back and I realized that, man, I've just been confronted with something, whatever it was. I didn't really understand the dynamic of it. But the next thing that happened was I see my boss pulling into the parking lot. And the order that it came was very strange. I said, friendly face, and now I'm safe. And why it came in that order, I have no idea. But I knew that I was safe with her there. And she responded to the call because she wants to make sure I'm good to go, because it was her first investigation as a supervisor. And she didn't know what she was getting into. And she came to my squad when I was working there. So she came over and we cleared the car together, good to go. And she could see that I was a little shaky. She's like, hey, you okay? I'm like, yeah. And I explained what had happened. And she started talking a little bit more about the depth of what triggers look like, because she had a little bit more experience on the job than I did at the time, of course. And so what I took away from that was, yes, it was a trigger, but it wasn't a negative effect mentally or emotionally on my body. It was just something that I recognized. I'm like, okay, I got hit with something. Here's how I processed through, was seeing her friendly face coming. I'm safe. And I got out of there. Even though it was an uncontrolled environment, I left there safely. That's how I processed it. So.
Looking back on it, though, that's not the proper way to deal with it. And if you could have, there's no way to go back and redo it. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, did you recognize it and just try to bottle it up and go, okay, I just need to move on from it? Or do you think that you were actually processing it?
I think a combination of both. I think because I was so young on the department and so inexperienced, I think that I had this kind of mentality of, okay, well, you survived the hard part now. And I never had any bad dreams. I never had one single dream about the entire shooting situation. And so I kind of had this mentality of the hard part's over, and whatever comes now is just one of those things where you can just compartmentalize it and then just don't worry about it, And looking back on it now, I think I actually did a fairly good job of recognizing what it was and not letting it linger and come back and haunt me again, if that makes sense. The problem with triggers, of course, is you don't ever know what or where it's going to be or how or whatever else. So,
did you find at the time after the shooting, did you become hyper vigilant? Did you, I need to go to more training, I got to get more shooting in, or was it something where in your mind, you just simply got back into a normal routine?
It took a little transition to get back to normal. But I'll be honest with you, it was really bad for my ex at the time, because I spent the next 3 days on the phone telling the story, which was good for me mentally. It was really bad for her. And so I literally just discounted her, and she was the one that really needed for me to be there for her, because she'd obviously heard the story. She showed up on the scene, everything else. But then I spent the next 3 days talking to all my friends about it and not talking to her one bit. And that was a huge mistake. But I do feel like I did want to have more awareness training, if you will. And for me, back in the day, it was more on the side of, okay, I've now graduated, so to speak, if you will. Now I want to be more tactically sound. And what I failed to do at the time was to recognize that, the emotional side of trauma is probably just as important as it is a tactical side. But being a young booter, I'm like, oh, cool, I've done this now. I've got a little credibility now. I can, go train with the SWAT team and all this kind of, which was completely stupid. I mean, they don't care, whatever. So
you don't discuss it in the book, and this is one of the questions I specifically was driving me. You do allude to the importance of sleep, and you're actually, I'll put you in the category of oddball, in the sense that most young cops want to work night shift. I remember as a young cop myself, I'd rather work nights. I don't want to be out here during the day. Yeah. All the normal people are out during the day, but you thrived in a daytime environment. But you don't talk much about what you did in your off-duty time to kind of separate you from work and personal life. Right. What was your escape, or what was your outlet when you weren't working? At
the time, it was spending time with the kid. It was just my daughter at the time. She was 8 at the time when I got hired on. So it was about a year and a half or so-ish, give or take. Actually, I was later than that because my youngest was born in 2001. So a couple of years into it. And then when he came along, it was just all about family. 100%. We did a lot of camping, a lot of motorcycle riding, and all these kinds of things when he got old enough. But it was pretty much just, I was able to, at the time, I did pretty well at leaving the cop hat at the door when I went home. Unfortunately, when I started getting more involved with the specialty squads and really, really sinking my teeth into, finding my way, if you will, that's when I really started spending way too much time on duty and even working off duty and all these kinds of things. And it was one of those where very typical. Most of my friends were all cops. All we did was tell cop stories and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't really have a life outside of the law enforcement community except for my immediate family. And my generation, probably very much like yours, was, your family doesn't need to know what you're dealing with and what you're going through, which is completely stupid. Of course they do, because she knows what kind of day I had the second I walk in the door. If I just pulled a dead baby out of a pool, that's going to be showing all over my face, and if I'm not sharing it with her, well, then I must be sharing it with somebody, and you can see what the path that's going to take, of course, so.
And we're going to get into the second shooting, which was almost I'll say it was the catalyst for you to kind of go, okay, it's time for me to walk away from this career. But in conjunction with that, did you ever go down a path of alternative medicines, alcohol, anything like that? Or were you, I guess what I'm getting at is, in reading the book, it really kind of sounds like in your own mind, you were able to compartmentalize that trauma and just kind of shove it down and move on. And I guess where I want to kind of ferret out is, if you could go back and do it all over again today, which obviously you can't, but what might you do different in looking back on how you dealt with it?
Well, the first one, I don't think there's really much I could have done to change that one. It's a strange coincidence that I happen to have a good friend of mine with me. And as it turned out, it wasn't by design by any stretch, but I ended up kind of being a liaison for him to join the force, which he never made, unfortunately. But that kind of took away from my own stuff, if you will. And it lent me the opportunity to let him really see what law enforcement looks like up close and personal. I mean, he was right there when the whole thing went down, so he saw it for sure. But then focusing my efforts on him versus taking care of myself. So I may have tried to focus more on me and more on the family, and I was never one of these guys I was walking around pounding my chest, arrogant. Oh, look at me, man, I just killed a guy. I was never that guy. Still never, after all the stuff I've done. I've always been extremely humble that way, because I know that it was literally 0.2 of a second between him killing me or me killing him, and because I just survived it. That was the mentality I had. And it was like, hey, you know what? I can't apologize, because it's either I go home or you go home, and that was my thought process.
You bring up a good point, and something I hadn't thought about, even though you wrote about it in the book. You had that civilian ride along, your friend. I wonder if that gave you something immediately to focus on, in the sense of, all right, I'm done, I'm safe. Are you okay? And I wonder if he had not been on that ride along with you, and you didn't have, even if you didn't perceive it, but if by transitioning and putting your attention on him and taking care of him kind of allowed you to process it maybe a little bit better.
100%. And not only that, and I mean, I'll be the first to admit that because I was focusing on him, I also didn't want to be taken care of by my department. I knew there was the internal investigations and all this kind of stuff, and the critical incident stress management folks, and they want to come and, at the time, the kumbaya hugs and all that. I don't want any part of that. As a younger kid, I'm like, no, I'm good. Hey, look at me, I'm fine. Look, I'm still here, kind of a thing. And that was a big mistake on my part too, to not let them reach me as well. Even if I just, I did. There was a few things that I had to go through, like with the psychiatrist and all these kinds of things. Had I been more open to letting them kind of reach me on a deeper level, I think, I never had any major traumatic shortcomings or anything else after the fact, but I could have probably been a little bit healthier and moved forward a little bit quicker than I did if I hadn't, you know what I mean? So.
Besides being forced to go talk to the shrink, what was the culture of your organization at that time, and how did they treat you post-shooting?
It was strange. When we get deeper into the story, I got to mention one other thing. I'll just talk about this now, but I made Officer of the Year for that, which I thought was, I mean, it's really good. It's a huge honor, all these great things. But, you know, if you look at it from, I mean, I'm gonna just say it, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but if you look at it in kind of the victim mentality, it's like, yes, I volunteered to join up. I volunteered to answer that call. I volunteered to put myself at risk, but there's still some kind of victimization going on there because, man, I had to kill a guy. And that's a pretty traumatic event for a lot of people. And now I'm being rewarded for that. It was kind of hard to wrap my brain around it. I'm like, I mean, I understand that you guys want to make sure that you know that I'm okay. And it was a vote from my precinct, and we had a list of other people that could have been Officer of the Year. It just turned out that it was me. And it was really strange seeing my photo on the wall for that entire year, because that's how we used to do it back in the day. And I was like, and it was kind of not a harsh reminder, but just before harsh, of seeing my face on the wall every day, knowing that, you know, a guy died at my hand. You know, it was kind of a strange thing for me.
It's a weird dichotomy, because you hope that you were nominated because of the totality of the circumstances, the viciousness of the original crime, and ultimately the capture. Your incident ended up being a shooting, but it was the capture of the suspect. But more than likely, looking back on the mentality of our peers, it was, he dumped the guy, let's make him Officer of the Year.
Yeah. And it was, you know, and I talk about this a lot with, you know, I know the FBI did a big thing on Don't Call Me Killer. You know, they have a whole documentary on it, which is really fascinating. And that was kind of the thing, you know, getting slapped on the back. Oh, yeah, good job, killer, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you know, as a younger guy, especially on the department, that's the last thing the guys need to hear. You know, they're already dealing with a whole slew of emotions. I mean, from everything from the investigation to, you know, obviously the scene itself. Now you're potentially going to be sued by the family. Now my stupid mug is plastered all over the news for 3 days. All this kind of stuff. You got people calling you constantly. You know, your squad mates are, you know, it's not a bad thing on this part. They want to check on you regularly. You know, hey, man, you good? Yeah. And after a while, you just get kind of sick of it. You're like, yeah, I'm fine. Just pretty much leave me alone. So then you start to go down the wrong path, start to shut down a little bit, because now anybody that looks like they're approaching you to ask you, you're like, I'm good. You know, just pretty much leave me alone. And that was kind of the direction that I was going. And it was unfortunate that I allowed myself to do that. So.
And confirm the date of that shooting, July
15th, yeah.
Of what year?
2000.
2000. And so you had quite a bit of a span between your second shooting. One of the things I want to hit on real quick, though, and you talk about this in the book, there was a point where you actually had a contract put out on you by a drug dealer. Was it the one person or the gang? I believe it was a motorcycle gang.
It was one person, as it turns out. He was basically a drug dealer, but he was high up in the food chain of the outlaw motorcycle gang in Arizona. Not anyone specific, but he had, because he sold so much dope, he sold them to all the biker gangs, and that was kind of where it all started. So,
how does something like that? Because I can't imagine what it would be like for you to be at home and have to worry about. It's not just me now. It's, you know, I've got to worry about my family and everybody around me. What was the mental impact on you during that point in time?
And, you know, it sounds really bad to say it this way, and it wasn't because I'm arrogant at all. But when I heard about it, I got a call from the local sheriff's department. There's a sergeant investigator. He goes, "Hey, do you know this guy?" I said, "Yeah, that's my buddy. I've been chasing this guy for over a year." And he goes, "Well, just so you know, he's got a contract."
Sarcastically, I'm saying, "Yeah, it's my buddy."
Oh, yeah, exactly. You know, and I mean, because we had, you know, close contact for a year. I mean, I booked him into jail 3 different times, a couple of pursuits, the whole thing. He tried to commit suicide twice on me in my custody. You know, it was just a crazy situation. So, of course, I knew the guy pretty well, you know. And so this guy calls me. I'm mowing my lawn. It's a Saturday. He's like, "Hey, you know, yeah, of course." He goes, "Well, just so you know, he's got a contract on you." I'm like, "Say again?" He goes, "Yeah." The short of basically, he's going to pay somebody with a Jaguar, which he'd had. And I can't remember it was an undisclosed amount of meth, a lot, like 20 pounds of meth, and then $50,000 in cash. And my first thought was, trying not to be arrogant, I'm only worth 50 grand. Holy shit. Come on, man. I got to do better than that. But then it dawned on me that he had the means for that. to carry that out. I'm like, wow, this is real.
And I think that's what's the significant point of that story is you first hear about it and you're like, huh, all right, yeah, because every one of us has heard at some point, oh, I'm going to kill you, or something to that effect. But when you actually process it and say, wait a minute, he's actually got the means to accomplish this. That had to be a real kind of, okay, now we really need to pivot and take this seriously.
For me, it was, and what occurred to me was I always had this thought process of, dude, come at me with whatever you got. I can handle it, or whatever. But then it didn't take me long to figure out that, well, when I'm at work, who's taking care of my family? That was a big thing. That was the hardest part for me because, at the time, I literally, because I'm just like everybody else. I park my cars in the driveway instead of the garage like you should. But either way, neither here nor there. So I walk out to my truck in the morning and first, I'm clearing my own driveway with my gun in my hand, and SWAT team watching the house and all this kind of stuff for a couple of weeks. And turned out nothing ever happened. But that whole time period when I was at work and, the SWAT team was, they weren't there all the time. It was just kind of like a drive-by every once in a while, just check up. And other folks on my squad, because I worked in the area that I lived, which was not a smart thing either, but that just kind of how it kind of all fell into place. But so other guys from my squad would kind of be around checking up, making sure. And my wife at the time wasn't working. She was still a stay-at-home mom, but with 2 little kids at home. Of course, my daughter's going to school. She's in elementary school. And so having to drive her back and forth to school every day was a little bit taxing on her as well. It's like, oh man. So that was the hardest part for me. For me, it's like, dude, come at me. I can take care of myself, but don't pick on my family, so.
Looking back on it, were you able to process that level of stress effectively?
Yeah.
Because you got to figure that 24/7, you're either concerned about your home or like you said, I'm at work right now, my wife is at home and my kids are at school. How do you keep yourself focused?
It was tough. The good thing is that this is pre-internet. So, the search engines and all that stuff weren't really popular. Could you still find me? Yeah, of course you can. But in her defense, my ex is like, she can take care of herself. Let's just say it that way. And I was more worried about this guy dealing with her. Like, you want to take on that? You go on ahead, man. Good luck with that. So, but in all reality, of course, the kid, and then when the little one was around, because this was 2004, so he was, 3 at the time, I guess. And so that was the big fear for them. And so, of course, just like most cops, we've got a plan in place. Okay, we're at the grocery store. I tell you to leave. Don't ask questions. Just get in there. Just leave, and I will find you later, or whatever else, kind of a thing. But when you're home at 2:00 in the morning and you're asleep, and of course my house is like anybody else. My bedroom's in the back of the house, and by the time I figure out what's going on, God only knows what could be happening. And both my kids' rooms are in the front of the house. And so, those were all thoughts that came to my mind. Nothing ever came out of it, as it turns out, long story. But those few, I'd say probably a year, before I finally figured out, well, nothing's going to happen. If it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. But of course, in the meantime, I did find the guy's girlfriend, which is a whole nother long part of the conversation too. So,
and I want to leave that part to encourage people to read the book.
Yeah.
So let's now move forward to the ambush shooting.
Okay.
I'll let you kind of give the lead up to it and exactly what happened, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, I got to go back a little bit and just, not to correct you, but I got in my first OIS in 99, which was me against a dog.
That doesn't really count.
It doesn't count. No, it doesn't count. But it was really strange because the stair-step process, if you will, led me to what ended up being a major failure during the gunfight. So it was almost, and then a dog, and then almost, and then a bad guy. And then fast forward 2013, same thing, almost, and then it was a rifle shooting. 2016, fast forward, now it's a rifle gunfight. And so the mentality I had was, all kidding aside, it was like when the target turns, I raise and fire 2 rounds, wait for the pizzas.
You are correct. And I apologize for making light of it. But for me, it was that first shooting of another human was what I really wanted to kind of focus on.
I 100% agree. And for me, I'll be honest with you, I've ended up having to take 3 people out, but the dog was the most devastating. I'll I'll shoot people all day because they're stupid. But dogs, they don't know any better. But the thought process I had was, when I fire my weapon, my assailant goes down and I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about it. Well, with Dave, when that happened, I had that thought process of I didn't know the difference between a shooting and a gunfight. Clearly, it's not rocket science, but you've got that in your brain that, in my case, when I put that first volley of rounds down range, the biggest mistake of my life that I ever made was instead of doing follow through, I dropped the muzzle of my rifle and the guy started shooting back at me. Now it's a gunfight. I'm like, holy shit! You guys didn't talk about this in the brochure, but that was where I was because I thought that, well, this is another shooting and I'm just going to wait for the pizzas. Yeah, maybe not. So yeah.
So give a little bit more lead into it. It was a call of I believe the family's son was trying to break into the house or something to that effect.
He did. It came out as a garden variety burglary. No big deal. Basically, the kid he'd used mom's van before. Actually came back, stole the van. When they called 911, they said, we're not taking a report on it because you let him use it before. So we didn't have a report on that. Okay, fine. He had standing in the house. So technically speaking, it really wasn't a burglary because he had been living there. They threw him out. He came back. So technically we're kind of borderline on a crime now, but not really. He did break into the dad's safe. Now he's got the gun in his possession. That steps it up a little bit for us. Still not really blowing up our skirts yet. And then he's suicidal. Okay, that's not illegal to be suicidal. I mean, and then he's also on dope. I mean, it's illegal to carry, not illegal to be on it unless you're driving. In Phoenix, that's how it works. But then at the very end, he makes a threat against law enforcement that he wants to have a shootout. Okay, now we've got a legitimate crime. The reason I say that is because I've done several presentations where people are like, we wouldn't even respond to that call. Like, well, I don't know why you wouldn't. You know that the guy's armed. He wants to have a shootout, and he goes and kills 3 or 4 people. You guys knew about it and didn't stop it. That's a huge liability. So we decided to respond to the call. So we get out there. I'm the very first one on the scene. Of course, being the resident ship magnet that I was, my thought process was I get off at 4 o'clock. It's 2:30, and my exact words were, "Oh, it's 2:30. I still got time to get into something." Okay, well, careful what you wish for there, kid. So, of course, not knowing anything at the time. So I happened to be plainclothes. I was on the specialty squad at that time for 14 years, 18 years on the department. I've got a tremendous amount of experience with what I'm doing. So go down there and scout the house. That's what you guys called me to do. Get down there. I see the van in the driveway. I can't see that the front door's been kicked in because there's a palm tree right in the view of the fatal funnel, if you will. So drive around down the street, park on the opposite side of the road. I'm looking to the northeast, and I'm out there, and now I'm just gearing up with all my heavy stuff, right? My tack vest and rifle and all this great stuff, Kevlar helmet. And I'm putting out information, which is nothing. I mean, I've got no foot traffic. I've got no vehicle traffic. I've got a van in the driveway and no movement. It was, looking back on it, it was pretty eerie. I'm like, wow, what? Because it was kind of a pass-through street, if you will, and there was really nothing going on. It was Wednesday at now almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's still nothing going on. So sitting out there, putting out the info. The dad, luckily the dispatcher was super heads up. She's like, hey, because he was going to go to the house. No, don't go there. Go to Safeway down the street. We'll meet you there. We got a kid watching the house, and you guys do your thing over there, and then we'll rally the troops. Which is exactly what they did. The plan from the moment the call came out was, well, first things first, we don't know where this guy is, so let's get out there and let's surround the house and call him out. We called for a SWAT team. They're on standby. They're working out at the academy down the street. Okay, fine. They're not coming. Call for a helicopter. They're about 15 minutes out. And we call for the K-9. They're about 20 minutes out. So we had all the resources that we had.
Just not readily available.
Correct. And unfortunately, because you know as well as I do, we're drilled that time is on our side in our community most of the time. But when you got a kid that wants to have a shootout with the cops, and we don't really have much time to play. We got to get out there and lock this thing down, which is what the plan was. And
what kind of time lapse were you guys dealing with at this point since he had last been seen, approximately?
Probably about 20-ish minutes, okay, give or take. From the time the call came out to when we got the actual information about the shootout comment to when I got on scene was right around 20 minutes, something like that. So you can only know that because it took me about 15 minutes to get down there. And the whole time driving down there, I'm like, man, wait for me. Don't start anything before I get down there, you know. because I want to be the savior. I want to do, all my cool tactical stuff, whatever. So get down there, and what we've got on the scene is we've got a sergeant running the scene. We've got several field training officers. We've got a handful of neighborhood enforcement team specialty guys, myself included. We've got 270-degree coverage around the front of the house, and we've got guys to the rear. We got the sucker locked down. We're good to go. What we didn't have, we don't have shields. We didn't have body-worn cameras. We don't have an armored car. We don't have all these things that are exposure. But what we do have are just our brains and our guns pretty much at that point. So I'm parked about 5 houses away when I see the troops starting to rally. I pull up to about 3 houses away in a perfect little cutout, if you will, from the car that I was driving. And guys are blocking streets to the north. They're blocking streets to the south. There's no question that the guy knows where I'm at or that we're there. At least so we think. We don't really know. The last information that we got was that he was at the house. And I got to emphasize at the house because we didn't know where he was, which is really bad for me. And I know we'll get into this whole thing too, the survivor's guilt, because Dave Glasser pulls up with his partner almost into the driveway to where the van is parked. His thought process being that, well, we don't want this guy having a rolling gunfight. So he decides to block in the van. I thought it was a very sound tactic. Impromptu decision. He just made that decision on his own. Just kind of the way he fell into the conga line turned out to be the fatal mistake, because now we figured out that the guy's sitting inside the driver's seat of the van. Oh man. And so for me, 18 years on, 14 on the net squad, called me to be the scout. I'm out there watching this house 13 long minutes. Never saw the guy inside the car. Never. I mean, he was hiding. In my defense, it took me a year, probably at least a year, to get over the fact that had I seen the guy, it probably wouldn't have changed a whole lot. We still would have probably blocked in the van, but it was one of those things where, we did everything we could and we still lost. So
when the shooting actually occurred, you talk about how you were in one position and it's kind of going through it in your mind of, well, maybe I should, move positions, and ended up firing into the driver's side door. Mm. But in that moment, well, let me take it back just a little bit. Where were you at when it initially kicked off? Were you still distance away, or I guess where I'm getting at is what prompted him to start shooting? As
soon as he saw Dave roll up in the driveway, he literally opened the driver's side door of the car, and reached back and fired 3 rounds. And one of the rounds missed Dave, and the other 2, one in the leg, one in the head, and just killed him.
What was your distance at that point in time?
I was actually on the passenger side, at about a 30-degree angle, 35 yards out. So.
And did you close that distance during your engagement with him?
I did not. So basically what happens is I get out of my car and I go around the back just for a better angle on the house versus a better angle on the car, because I knew we had people north of me that had that side of the car. My responsibility is the south side or right side of the house, so that's where I got out. As soon as I get in the middle of the street, no cover, nowhere to go, that's when the gunfire erupts. And I talk about this in the tactical world a lot, where it took me, I estimate about 2.5 seconds to make the decision to transition from the house to the van, safety catch off, finger on the trigger, and start delivering rounds. 2.5 seconds, give or take, which is an eternity. I mean, it is a long time. And I show a video of what that looks like in reality. So.
And that was all I was trying to get in my head is your positioning. And if you explained it into the book, I apologize that I'm kind of missing the nuance of it. But that was what I was kind of going towards, was where were you at the time when the round started coming from the van, and your instinct to move, but then kind of, if I'm misinterpreting it, almost feeling like you kind of put yourself in a bad position.
Yeah. I did, only because, and I hate saying it this way, but a really close friend of mine, in fact, the SWAT guy that relieved me off the scene, said it best. He goes, man, Chris, we're cops. Sometimes we got to expose ourselves. And I didn't really understand that dynamic till after. But when I get out into the middle of the street, my thought process is, I've got the biggest patrol rifle I'm allowed to carry. If something goes down, I've got a weapon system that can either do one of 2 things. I can give this guy some pause, or I can stop him in his tracks. And I thought, well, I've got my Kevlar, I got my vest, got my rifle, I'm protected, even though I don't have any cover. If something goes down, I've got all this equipment on me that I can use to protect myself. Turned out that Murphy had other plans for us. So just the worst thing you can imagine. So to answer your question, so I'm firing that first platform, if you will, from about 35 yards away, 30-degree angle. I estimate somewhere between 7 and 10 rounds. Get done. I put those rounds in the middle window of his van, thinking that should solve the problem. And any other time of the day, the rest of my life, if I do that, it'll probably finish it off. It'd have been done. But unfortunately, the guy was not prepared to give up. And so as soon as I get done firing, come off target, he reaches out that same window or same direction and fires 3 rounds back at me. And that's when I realized, I'm like, holy cow, I'm in it now. I can't stop. And those rounds missed my head by centimeters. I could actually hear and feel the pressure of the rounds going past. So I moved offline. I got off the X, came back up for that second volley, which I estimate between about 12 and 15 rounds for a total of 22 rifle rounds, now square into the passenger side of his door. So,
and fast forwarding, Dave is already shot at this point?
Correct.
Did you know that at this point?
I did not know.
And ultimately, the conclusion was a suspect died.
Correct.
Was it attributed to you or just a myriad of those officers returning fire?
We don't know.
Okay.
Per the medical examiner, he had so many rounds in him, they had to quit counting. And nobody can confirm which kill shot was, which was whatever it was. So.
And so how soon after the shooting stopped did you now realize that your friend Dave had actually been hit?
It was probably 2 or 3 minutes into it, because I transitioned from the street to the driveway to the house to the south to Ryan Lee's door, Dave's partner, to the back of the Tahoe, to Dave's driver's side door. And I was holding on that position for probably about a minute. That's when I heard, we got an officer down. I know I heard it on the radio, but my brain shut down. I didn't hear anything on the radio whatsoever, including the 22 rounds of rifle that I fired with no hearing protection. I didn't hear one single round go off. So another officer comes up and he was explaining that Dave had been shot. And that's when the reality started kicking in. And then my fear and anxiety just shot through the roof. So,
and one of the things you talk about that you did immediately, and I wanted to ask you about this, you called your wife.
I did after the scene was all done. Yep.
What was the motivation there? Just to make sure that she heard from you first?
Yes, 100%. And I have heard of a whole bunch of people. In fact, my girlfriend was, she heard a lot about what was going on, and she heard a lot of stuff on the news. And I wanted to make sure, because, my now ex understands that when you get a call when I'm at work, answer your phone, because 5 times prior she had to answer that call. 3 of those other ones were shootings, and then the other 2 were me being put in the hospital. And now you got number 6 with Dave. So,
and you hit on that, the fact that you're going to get those calls from unknown numbers. And as you talk about in the book, not answering that call may be something that you ultimately could regret. So answer that phone, even if you don't recognize the number.
Please do. Absolutely. Because it is kind of one of my pet peeves that, I don't really care, but people that, they advertise all these kinds of things on Facebook, and then all of a sudden you've got this guy showing what he had for dinner. Next thing you know, you talk about an officer down. It's like, dude, this is not where you want to be learning this kind of stuff, So, long of it is basically just answer the phone. So,
and so going back into the book, you've been to several officer funerals at this point. What was it about this shooting for you that changed, in the sense that, was it a totality of all the trauma, or was it the specifics of this incident?
Yes, it was a very large combination of 18 years prior of stuff that I hadn't properly processed through. And Dave was a catalyst that pretty much pushed me over the edge. Now, being on that scene directly had a huge impact as well. That was probably the one major factor between all the other ones, where I'd only been on one other officer being killed on duty, and that was in my first year on. And I still have that traumatic memory of that whole thing going on. I didn't see it happen, but I got there after the fact. But there's something completely different about showing up to a scene after and then being involved with the whole thing at the same time. So,
and was there any difference in the way the department addressed you post-shooting in this one, as far as getting you mental health help, getting peer counseling, anything at all?
They had they changed their protocol in 2015. In fact, 2 of my really close friends got into a shooting, pretty nasty little gunfight. And what Phoenix had done, they transitioned from the 3 days off to 30 days off, which is good. On some level, they've got the right idea in mind. They're not really doing everything that they could do, in my opinion. unfortunately, because a lot of the people that are making these decisions haven't been through that situation before. And not to take anything away from what they're trying to do, because they are making an attempt to do the right thing. So I got my 30 days off, and during that time, of course, I got to go see the city psychiatrist two times now. It used to be just one time. You go in there, you tell your story, you're sleeping, are you eating, all these kinds of things, are you drinking, whatever else. And then you take the letter back to your boss. You're like, yep, here we go. You're signed off. You're good to go back to the street. So now what they do is they make you go twice. You go the first initial one, and then you go back for a secondary one about 2 weeks later or so, in that 30-day period, if you will. And so,
did you also go to speak to a psychologist or a psychiatrist on your own?
I did. The reason was, and God bless her, I absolutely love our city psychiatrist. She's super great, except that she basically has a checkbox list of the questions and doesn't really get too deep into the heavy stuff. For me, the problem was, and you heard the rest of some of the stories, is 3 times prior, I had to go see her. And so based on what she knew from my prior history, that I was squared away. And so when I went in for that very first meeting with her, I walked into to find a sealed envelope that I was good to go. I'm like, you haven't even started talking to me yet, and I kind of took that to heart, that it's like, well, you're not being objective about what I really need.
So by this point, you were seeing the effects of the trauma, and you actually wanted to talk about it. And the city psychiatrist is kind of like, oh, he's good to go.
Yep.
But based on past interactions with you.
Correct. Yes. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from her. She's fantastic, and I love her to death. But what her protocol is doesn't meet what I needed. And so I actually sought out help on my own, which was probably one of the, at least in the initial part, one of the best things I could ever have done for myself. So,
how soon afterwards did you realize that I need this help, and if I'm not getting it from this person, I'm going to go find my own?
I'd say, so the shooting happened about May 18th. So I'd say probably mid-August, give or take, something like that. Cause I got sent home, and unfortunately, side note to the whole thing, I couldn't get to see the city psychiatrist for 7 weeks. So I'm home for 30 days, and it was 7 weeks before I could go see her for the first time. The reason for that was because we had 6 other officer-involved shootings in that 6-week period. It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, it was insane. So we had all these officers that had to go see her, myself included. Plus we had 6 officer shooters on my particular scene. So all those guys had to go see her as well. So, so when I go back to the street for a little while, and I make a comment that's very significant I was down there talking to our EAU folks, our employee assistance folks. Very, very good team. And they're the ones that basically told me at some point in time that, you're done. And I was in that denial phase. I'm like, oh, no, I'm good. So I happened to be down there, and I was talking to one of my most trusted EAU folks. And when I'm walking out the door, I said, hey, I'll see you later, man. I'm going to go find a place to hide. And he's like, well, stop. Get back in here. What does that mean? And that's kind of where the realization that things were starting to not work very well for me mentally and emotionally. That's where it all started. So.
Was it that comment of, and when you say, and I got to go find someplace to hide, you meant I'm going to hit the road and I'm going to go find someplace to hide.
Exactly.
But was it that comment that made the EAU person say you're done, or were they already seeing something?
They hadn't seen anything yet. That was the very beginning. And having about a 15 or so minute conversation after that, about a week or so later, I got a call from Lieutenant from EAU saying, we need to talk, come down here to our office. So I do. And she tells me in no uncertain terms, she's like, we love you, but you're done. Where do you want to go? What do you mean? Well, you're no longer going to be on the enforcement side until ABC happens or whatever else. Pick a spot. Okay. So I picked going to the rifle range, which I spent 7 months at.
At this point now, where you realize, okay, I need to talk to somebody. The trauma has piled up enough. I can't keep it down. Was there a fear of actually admitting that you needed to do that?
I never had that. And what the realization for me was, it was other people going, hey, pounding me in the chest going, hey, you're not okay. And I was, as we are, I'm like, I'm good. What did it for me was when I woke up about 2:00 in the morning, 3 or 4 nights in a row, having anxiety attacks. And I'm like, wow, something's not right. I never had a fear of, and it may come across as an arrogant way, hopefully not, but because I had such a good reputation and people knew that I was a hard charger, I was a go-getter, I had a ton of experience and just very easy to get along with and all that kind of stuff. I was never worried about losing any face, if you will, or credibility with my department or my peers for that reason.
Just losing your gun in front of a suspect sitting on a curb.
Well, we ain't talking about that, but yeah. Oh my God, right? Yeah, that was pretty bad. We'll talk about that story. But as far as internally goes, I really wasn't worried about that because I knew that I had enough common sense to realize that, man, I'm not okay, and I'm wearing a badge and a gun. I can't be out on the street acting a fool like I am and trying to. And I say it this way in the book that, the people of my community deserve the best I can give them. And if I'm not giving it to them, then I'm failing them. And that's not what I signed up for. So,
and it almost goes in contradiction to each other. So you realized you needed help, but your peers and others around you were pointing to you, hey, you need to get help, but you were lying to them saying, I'm okay.
Exactly.
What were they seeing that was triggering them to tell you, hey, man, you really need to go get some help?
They knew just from that one comment that I'm going to go find a place to hide.
Okay.
That was the one that kind of set me off. And DAU folks, they are highly trained in recognizing some of the signs. And just by the luck of the draw, the chance that the lieutenant that called me in happened to know me from the street in the area that I had worked. So she had seen me in action before, so she kind of knew how I was. So even though it was borderline kind of checkbox questioning, she hit on a few questions that she needed to ask me. She's like, hey, what about this? And kind of probing me as an investigative interrogator kind of a thing. And I'm like, okay. And she blindsided me with a few things that flat out, I can't deny. I'm like, oh, well, yeah. Well, what about this? Well, yeah. And then she knew, she's like, okay, well, based on what we know, and you're not being punished. Don't think about you're 100% squared away. We're not worried about anything else, but you need to take a break. That's how they said it to me. Just take a break. You've been through hell. Look what you did in 4.5 seconds to where you got to kill a guy, you almost die, and Dave is killed. You're not okay. I'm like, wow. And the really strange part about that, when I finally came to the conclusion I wasn't okay, it was like a weight being lifted off my entire chest. I'm like, oh, I remember physically sighing out loud and going, yeah, I need help. And after that, it was perfect. And that's what I talk about now, where I made the decision that I wanted to be okay. That's all it was. It was very simple, and I did.
You made it about a little over a year back on the streets after that last shooting, correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to jump forward to basically the end of the ride. You had a moment, you're like, I am done with this. You went into your desk, cleared out your desk, I'm going home.
Yes.
And part of that was that compounded it for you was you stayed home, and each day you called in and said, I'm taking another day off, I'm taking another day off. But you weren't returning the calls from your organization because they were trying to check on you.
Correct.
When that moment happened, and that week that you were home, because you actually did, then you just tried to come back to work the following week like, hey, guys, I'm back. Everything's good to go.
Right, exactly.
But in that week, did you know you were done?
Well, backstory to that. So on my 20th anniversary, my best friend lost his dog in a deployment, and I completely just lost it. I was done. I was. And I'll have to come back to it. That's not why I retired. I got a whole nother story about that we'll get to.
But that was kind of it seems like, at least from reading the book, that kind of feels like the tipping point.
It was a huge transition of a combination of triggers and complex PTS, PTSI, whatever you want to call it. I never felt like I had a disorder, more just an injury. That's a whole nother conversation. But it was one of those things where I knew that if this continues on, I'm probably not going to recover from the next one. You know what I mean? And going back to 2000 with my buddy on my shooting my civilian ride along buddy, I've now transitioned that same kind of thought process to my best friend Curtis, while he's suffering through losing his dog. And we're at his house. It's just him and I. We're both falling down crying, trying to figure out why, all these mistakes.
And that was also another shooting where the dog ended up dying, correct?
It wasn't actually a shooting, but basically the bad guy ended up smothering the dog to death. It was horrible. I mean, as worse as it could possibly get. So So now I've focused on trying to save him, and again, not taking care of myself either, and it was, now we're talking 20 years on. The joke was, the city's on probation. I can pretty much leave whenever I want to, so to speak. It was all the shootings, all the stuff that happened beginning of 2016 that led me down this path of failure. And now to the end of my career, literally the day of my 20th anniversary, now I've got to deal with this too. It was too much for me.
When did you know you were done?
I mean, it's not a funny story, but it's a very unusual situation that I got myself involved with. Basically respond to a call. It's a kind of a kidnapping / armed robbery sort of a thing. Long story short on that part, guy basically holding 2 people at gunpoint inside of a car. Being the resident ship magnate, of course, this is...
He's not making things up. Read the book.
I know.
He highlights... Whether you want to call yourself a ship magnet or just in the right place at the wrong time, you ended up in the right place at the wrong time a lot of times.
A lot of times, yeah. And a lot of it was me just seeing things that most people would either ignore or just not notice. So, I mean, I do kind of feel like I had a talent that way, which may have been a curse, who knows, but either way. So this call comes out, I'm right there. I'm less than a mile away. So I get out there and fast forward, we track the guy down, we find him, come around the corner, doing our cop thing, get on the ground. And I was about 13 yards away from this guy, and I had a decision to either hold on this guy and give him commands or shoot him in the head from about 13 yards out. And I'm giving him commands, and he looks over at me in full uniform, and I don't have my rifle anymore, which is another long conversation. All I've got now is my .45. And so he makes a decision to go ahead and put his gun down on the ground and lay down and prone out. So we approach like we do all of our cop stuff, hook him up. When I go to secure my weapon, my fingers completely slacked out on the trigger. And I recognized the reason for that was because I was so afraid that if I've got to shoot somebody else, now here's going to be shooting number 5, I will not recover from this, At the time, that was my thought process. And it wasn't because I thought I wasn't going to be okay. It was because based on all the stuff that happened with my buddy's dog and my boss and getting sent to the front desk and all this kind of stuff, I don't want to have to go through this and be on the desk for a year. And so when I go to secure my weapon, completely slacked out on the trigger. The very next day I dropped paper and retired.
So I want to there's a couple directions I want to go right now. First, one poignant story that I really want you to talk about in the book. You went back to the shooting scene of the first person, and you talked to the woman, the business owner, and asked her for something that you could put on the wall as kind of a remembrance for that incident, but not in a way to brag or anything like that. I'd like you to talk about that, but also apparently there's other memorials throughout the city similar related. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. Oh yeah. All over. And we've got the regular, like the signs, street signs and these kinds of things. And I've got places where I've had my friends fall and not get back up, where I've left, like my buddy Davey Reeby, he always carried toothpicks. I had a toothpick in his mouth. I'd go to his gravesite, leave toothpicks or like a bell keeper or something like that. So, or flowers or whatever else for the actual scene sometimes where they actually fell. That particular one, it was a strange thing because coincidentally, just by one in 100 chance, the lady that owned the car also owned a trinket store in the same strip mall. So her and I became really close at the time because she was...
This is the woman who he was trying to steal her car to get away.
Correct, yes, yeah. And so now she flat out asked me, she's like, should I sell this car? What should I do? I go, well, I mean, that's not really a question I can answer because you've got to decide that, every time you get in that driver's seat, that some knucklehead lost his life here. Is that something you can deal with? I don't know. And is that going to be like a house when you sell, it's full disclosure? You want to let somebody know what happened, or are you just going to whatever you're going to do with the car? So we had a long conversation about that. And so I'm inside of her store, and I flat out did ask her, because this is my very first major critical incident, and I needed something that I could kind of bring myself back to reality on some level. And it was a really strange thing. It was basically like a rectangular shaped piece of wood that had the internal part cut out in shape of a heart. And I thought, what a perfect memento. It's me just being able to say, here's like a plaque, so to speak, on the wall as a remembrance of my survival. And that was the reason I wanted to do that. So.
And when you mentioned putting it on the wall, is it on the wall of the building of that shopping mall?
Directly in front of where her car was parked, right above, like high up, so people can't just go up and grab it. It's about 10 feet up on the wall. And it's just, I mean, I put it up in such a way that it wouldn't be able to, it's been removed since, probably because they painted the building or whatever else. But it sat up there for probably a good first 10 years, give or take. So.
And she was on board with this.
100%.
She almost, if I'm interpreting it correctly, she almost kind of felt like she was being included in it, in that decision.
It was very strange that you say it that way, because that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't realize that until her and I started getting close and talking, and then I wanted her to be a part of it because she did play a significant role, and now she's got to live with the after effects of what basically was ultimately his decision to make, but that I had to finish. So
let's end your career back at the start of your career with that amazing incident, because you talk about it in the book. What happened at the academy with reloads?
Oh my God. Yeah. So that one, that's so funny, because I was going through all my old stuff 2 days ago, as a matter of fact, and I found that memo about all the stuff that I had to do. So rewind, before I ever got hired on by the department, I had bought a gun before and gone to the desert, and I found this place I used to like to go to the desert. And so fast forward, I'm in the academy. I meet a friend of mine, as it turned out later on down the road, who owned a gun shop close to where that spot was. So I'll go in there, introduce myself. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for some 40 caliber, whatever. And he just happens to sell me this bag of reloads. And I didn't know at the time that particular weapon system, the Glock 22 40 cal, doesn't feed reloads very well. At least I think it was a Gen 2 back in those days. And so I take the gun.
And this is department issued?
Department issued gun. Oh, yeah. I am off duty buying ammo, even though because our class sergeant, God bless his soul, he basically said, if you guys are having trouble qualifying, if you find a way to practice on your own, cool. If you guys do something stupid, then you're on your own. And all I heard was, hey, go shoot your guns in the desert. So, of course, here I am. So I grab the gun, go down to the desert, and I get out there, and the first round went off just fine. But when the gun reset itself, it didn't go back into battery properly. So it fired that second round halfway out of battery. Ultimately, all that happened was it blew the magazine out and it shot the extractor off, which now I could probably fix in like 2 seconds, no big deal. But of course, at the time, I don't know, and it was friggin' loud. I mean, I had hearing protection on, and it still like rang my ears for a while. So clearly, you can see the mistakes that I'm making. And so it's a Saturday. There just happened to be a gun show in town. Glockmeister was in town. I go down to the fairgrounds. Can you guys fix this gun? Yeah, it was like a $50 repair. It was something really simple. And then, so I don't say anything until Sunday. So I reach out to my recruit training officer, and I'm like, hey, I gotta disclose. Well, let me back up. I called one of my, our carpool, like the mom of our group. I called her. I'm like, hey, what should I do? And she's like, oh my God, why did you tell me? Because now I'm involved. I'm like, oh, I never thought about it that way. You were like the go-to liaison person, because her dad was on the force as well. And so I just kind of thought, well, you're the one that I can get advice from. And now I've got her sucked into the whole thing as well, which is a huge mistake on my part. Of course, I don't know any better. I'm some stupid kid. What do I know? So I don't tell my RTO for a day. And he's like, why are you waiting 24 hours? And I'm like, well, he's like, here's what you need to do. He goes, write the longest memo you've ever written and explain what you did. And it was funny because I tell Natalie, my girlfriend, all the time about what I wrote. I'm like, on this day and time, of course, writing like police stuff. On this day and time, I did this and this and this. Please don't fire me. And then I read another paragraph, please don't fire me. And every other freaking sentence after that was, please don't fire me. And it went through that whole entire thing. And so fast forward, Monday morning, I get down to the academy, and we're in the senior class. I think we're 17 weeks total, but we're in week 13. So we're senior class, and I'm sure you probably remember, you get up on the parade deck, and every morning it's the same protocol. For the younger classes, it's open ranks and all the dumb shit, and whatever. So we get up there, and they tell us all to be in uniform, which we're done with that. We're like, what do we? We're all in like range gear now, jeans and T-shirts. That's all we ever wear now. And so now everybody's in uniform. So we get up there, and they're like open ranks, and everybody's going, we're the senior class. We don't. So based on my last name, I happen to be the third row, if you will. So I've got row 1, 2, and I'm row 3, one behind me. And I've got 3 other classes of students all behind us. I mean, we're talking like 150 people behind me, and I know they did it on purpose. And I haven't confirmed this with my former class sergeant, but we laugh about it still. They did it on purpose this way. And so the entire freaking academy head shed group comes over to me directly, and my class sergeant standing in front of me, and my knees are buckling. All I can picture is I'm going back to carpet work, and it kind of I say in the book that he yells at me, but that's kind of my remembrance. But he was actually very calm, and he's like, "Give me your gun belt." I'm like, "Whoa!" So in front of the entire academy, take off my gun belt and I hand it to him, and he goes, "Be in the lunchroom at whatever time." And so we're on the parade deck, I think at about 7. He's like, "Be in the lunchroom at like 9 o'clock." He's like, "Keep your mouth shut and don't say a word." I'm like, "Okay." So the entire thing is like pin drop silence. I mean, like death silence. So they leave us in open ranks for like another 15 minutes, like they like to do, of course. And they close us all up. All right, dismiss. We all do our thing. And they do the flag raising, of course, like we do every morning. And so we get sent off to do whatever. And of course, it's like, hey, everybody in the whole freaking world is like, "What happened?
What the hell did you do?"
I'm like, I'm in tears. I'm like, "I can't talk about it, man." So I'm freaking out. I'm pretty much planning what the conversation with my the time wife's going to look like. I'm like, well, I screwed up and I got fired, so I guess we're going back to whatever. So go up to the RTO's office, the recruit training officer's office, and it's probably just like your same exact thing. You stand outside the door and you pound on the door.
Request permission to come in.
Exactly, right. And they leave and there's no way they don't hear you because their desks are right there, and it's a steel door, so come on. So, pound on the door, and then you can only knock, like, I think it's 4 times. 4 times, and then, you stand there and you wait and you wait and you wait. 15 minutes or so goes by. And so, of course, I'm at the door, like 8:59.59, right on the mark, perfectly. Pound on the door, and they all know because the entire staff understands what's going on, of course. And so they leave me out there for like 15 minutes or whatever it is. So they finally come in. So I go in there and I'm standing at attention, recruit Hoyer to meet Sergeant Wheeler, whatever else. And I'm standing there for like 45 minutes. I'm standing there waiting. And they're walking around. They're packing like they don't even see me. And I'm like, "Okay, dude, come on, whatever. Let's get this over with." Because they're doing this on purpose by design. And I'm in panic mode still. My knees are shaking and I'm trying not to cry. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing ever." So finally, RTO comes over, gets in my face, starts screaming at me. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I got to see Sergeant Wheeler." He's like, "What's your business?" And I told him whatever it was. And
like you didn't already know.
Yeah, of course. And they do it. It's all a game for them. And I love it when I go back to the academy and I watch this stuff going on because I'm like, "Oh my God, dude." I mean, I try not to laugh, but because you see these young kids and they're buckling, same kind of a thing. So I make my way over to his office, and I'm standing at the doorway. And he's not in the office. And he comes in and goes around the other side of the desk, leaves him standing at his doorway for another however long, "All right, sit down in the chair." Sitting in proper attention and stuff. And he reads all the stuff, all the mistakes that I made, the 5 policy violations that I have now done. And then he starts in on me about, "You violated this and you violated my trust. And I told you if you did this, and now you've got me hung out to dry." And
there are Academy Award actors who aren't putting on as good a show.
Oh my God. And believe me when I tell you, I was the other guy on the other side of that fence, sinking down lower and lower into my chair, just thinking, just get it over with, man. Just say the word so I can pack my shit and go. And so finally, I swear to God, it was 30 minutes of ass chewing, and I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay. And then finally he's like, "Well, we decided we're not going to fire you." And boom, man, I sprang back to life, man. I'm like, "Yeah, cool." And he's like, "Just no. He's like, I suggest you get a freaking box of pens and a pair of running shoes because you're done." I'm like, "Oh shit, okay." So sure enough, I ended up with, I think it was somewhere around 5,000 word essays, a whole bunch of trail runs, push-ups, sit-ups, all that kind of stuff. And, when I finally get done, he basically leaves it with, "All right, you realize the dynamic that just happened here." He's like, "Don't screw this shit up again." He goes, "One more mistake and you're truly done." I got to say this, fast forward, this isn't in the book because I learned this after I wrote it. Of course, I want him to know what my career looked like because he retired, left Arizona, went to someplace on the East Coast. And so I reached out to him. I said, hey, I want to send you a copy of my book. And he sends me back this really long email going, hey, you never knew this because blah, blah, blah reason. He goes, all in the entire Phoenix Police Department, all the academy, from the commander all the way down to everybody, wanted to fire you. I'm the only one that said no and kept me. And I was reading the email and I'm crying. This is 2 years ago now or whatever else. And I'm like, oh my God, this dude hardcore went to bat for me because he saw something special in me. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. So thank God for that. So
as you were telling the story, I was kind of thinking about something, and now you say that and I'm like, oh, but the sarcastic side of me now, 30 years into the job, almost when he said, hey, you're not going to be fired, it's like, as you stand up to walk out, hey, you want some extra reloads?
Oh man. I'm like, my actual things where you want to donate a kidney, I can shine your shoes, I'll paint your office, whatever else. Man, I was flipping out, of course. And then it was so funny because not long after, I think it was about a week later, we get our batons and we go through baton training. And I think I went to the bathroom or something stupid. And our main RTO had come over and said, all right, no more. Because like when you get the handcuffs, everybody's playing with the cuffs. You get sick of hearing that ratchet. Well, he got sick of everybody playing with their batons. So I left to go use the bathroom. I came back.
PR-24s?
No, the expandables. We had the
okay.
Yeah, I did have one of those later on, but never got a chance to use either one of them except for knocking on doors, but whatever. But I go out there, and of course, I don't know any better. So I whip the baton open, and everybody's like, and Steve, I remember his name, he comes over and he's like, what did I just say? And I'm like, sir, I don't know. He's like, I told you not to, and he's like, you're done. And I'm like, and I thought I was going to get fired again. And then one of our class leader, I guess, or whoever was like, no, sir, he was in the bathroom. He didn't know. I sent him over there to go. And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, it was pretty bad. So, but I made it, graduated. Although I did have at the time, the most amount of discipline ever handed out in one sitting. I was like, oh, I don't really want that award, but
somebody's had to have taken that award from you by this point in time.
I would hope so. Yeah. Take my name off that policy, move it to somebody else, So
your last day as a cop was what date?
That was July 5th, 2018.
And did you have a plan for yourself, what you were going to do afterwards?
I knew that, unfortunately, my ex and I, we split up in 2015, and she knew from the first 5 seconds that she knew me that at some point I was going to move to San Diego. That's my lifelong dream, and she wouldn't allow it to happen. So
what was the draw to San Diego?
Mostly because of the beach, the weather. I grew up in New England on the ocean, and being in the desert, I hated it. I did. I only stayed mostly for the career and to let the kids get grown up and move out and do their thing. So, and I missed it by a month, unfortunately. I did. I retired July 2018. I moved out to San Diego in April 2019, and then my youngest graduated high school in May of 2019. So I'm like, oh, I missed it by a month, but I wanted him to be out of school and be secure before I left, but it didn't happen that way. But so I knew that I was coming out here for whatever it ended up being. And at the time I thought,
other than moving to California, the San Diego area, you really didn't have a specific plan.
Well, I knew I wanted to find a job where I could be an instructor.
Okay.
Whatever that was. And it turned out I struck gold with the Miramar, basically the police academy for the Marine Corps. And I was actually here on vacation, saw the thing. It was on one of the search engines, and I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect for me. So I put in the application on Wednesday. I'll leave that Thursday morning. I get back, and on Monday I get a call saying, hey, can you come out and do an interview? And I'm like, dude, I was like literally just there. Very next day, I jump back and come back to San Diego, do the primary interview. I come back later on for the secondary interview, got picked up and got the job. And it was like, dude, I mean, it was absolutely a dream come true. And matter of fact, I moved out here. I graduated April of 97, and I moved out here April 17th, 97. I moved out here April 16th, 2019. So it was a day before would have been my 21st year. So
when does the idea to write the book come about, and how does it come about?
That was, this was completely unplanned, as it turned out. I remember it was about September 2017. I'm supposed to meet some friends up in northern Arizona. I'm going to hop on the bike and just go for a ride, whatever else. And I couldn't sleep. I'm tossing and turning and rolling around. I can't figure out what's going on with me. And out of nowhere, I rolled over, broke out the laptop at 2:00 in the morning, and just started freaking pounding the keys. And I kind of had that thought process of, well, I didn't write those stories that everybody told me to write during my entire career because nobody ever does. And I realized that in the combination of EAU and both the psychiatrists that I'd seen and some internal assistants, family, whatever else, it still wasn't enough, you know. And I had thought that, you know, the motorcycle is my number one thing to go out and escape life and everything else that goes with it. That still wasn't enough. So this is how this thing was born. Woke up, started writing, and I swear to God, the thing wrote itself. Before I even knew it, I had over 1,000 pages written of 20 years of experience.
Through all of the counseling that you had been going through leading up to it, was there ever any recommendation of journaling or writing or anything at all?
There may have been, and I probably blew it off. I'm like, well, you know, I've never done it before. Why would I do it now? And what do I know about writing a book? I mean, you know, this is one of those where you're like, yeah, and everybody tells you should, and whoever really does, you know, not very many ever do. So,
and from that, was the book what was the catalyst to get you out doing public speaking?
No, actually, the public speaking started before the book was ever even born. That actually started in about August of 2016, rather. And I remember because there was a sergeant from another agency that came to speak to our class. And you mentioned working the day shift, and that was maybe a little bit of a seed planted in me that I'm like, people that do stuff during the day, they don't care who's watching. They're not trying to hide, like the bank robberies and the burglaries and stuff like that I love getting into. This guy got into a righteous, nasty freaking shooting, broad daylight, up in a very prominent area. I'm like, holy cow, wow. And I remembered that story, thinking how impactful that was for me as a recruit, and how my story will probably be as equally impactful for the new kids coming on board, and they need to hear it. Because it's way more than just a gunfight. It's about, like, very much like we're talking about now, what did I do to prepare myself for transition, not only after the gunfight, but what am I going to do now to take care of my family and myself? So,
you mentioned before we started recording that there's actually been some amendments to the book. So in the newer version, what's been included that wasn't included in my version?
I wrote a story about what I call my seed. Or seed, I can't remember what the title is now. It's kind of funny because when this thing was getting to the finishing stages, I wanted nothing to do with it. I'm like, I don't care. Let's just be done. Because after you read it 50 times, you're like, dude, come on, let's move on. I don't want to do any more of this stuff, man. So I wrote a story called Seed, and that was born out of when I was 14, before my mom kicked me out of the house. I ended up saving this lady's life. She was like 60 years old, had an overdose, and I was in health class in high school, and had gone through CPR class. But I was only a couple of days into it, but I learned enough to be able to do that. And so I think that may have been the seed that was planted in me being a first responder, as it turns out. So I wrote that story. I failed to write any stories about the dispatch community because, you know, that's how selfish I am. So I realized that they had such an unbelievably integral role in my life as a cop that I needed to give them way more than just regular acknowledgments. I'm like, hey, you guys did this and this and this and kept me. I mean, I had literally a team of dispatchers that would keep me in check all the time. In fact, call me by first name on the radio, which is really bad. So I wrote that story. And then I had another couple of friends that went through some other traumatic events. I quoted them in 2 other stories as well to add 4 to the new version. And then the big, huge push for me was reaching out to Dave Grossman, who's one of the biggest heroes of all time, who actually wrote the foreword for me.
Going into the process of writing, you said you woke up that morning and just started banging on the laptop. Did it immediately grab you and like, oh, I need to keep writing this? Or was it something of, okay, I wrote a little bit, I'm good?
Initially, I'd say I probably couldn't stop writing for the first probably 2 weeks. I mean, it all just started coming out. In fact, I was sitting there because I was taking a lot of time off in between the shooting and then going back to the street. So the time frame might be a little bit off of where I was with that whole thing. But either way, when I was writing, I actually had a notepad next to me because every time I would write something new, something else would pop up. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that story. Don't forget to write this down. Don't forget, I had, a whole entire page of paper of other notes for other stories that I wanted to put in there. And unfortunately, when Natalie, my girlfriend, actually did the editing for me, she had all this stuff And she still can't believe it. She's like, what is this? I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, the entire thing is in capital letters. I'm like, well, that's how we write reports. But she's a professional editor. They don't understand that. She's like, so anyway, when I gave it to her, she started reading some of the stories. She's like, well, let's keep these in. Let's take these out. So I've got technically another second book that's ready to go. Just needs to be edited. But she's got like a whole ton of stuff going on. So I'm waiting for her to finish up with that to do the second one. So. And
that leads me into my next question. Now that you've written the first one, and obviously you've got a second one you're working on, does the writing process appeal to you where you think that could be something that you're going to stick with long term?
As it turns out, it's a very strange thing. And I was up in another city up in LA yesterday, and a lot of people are, they want me to sign the book for them. And I'm like, this is not something I can't get used to signing books. I mean, being a published author, I don't really know what to do with that. But as it turned out, one of the biggest compliments I ever got was that people that had known me prior to, when they read the book, they're like, man, it's like you're reading it to me. And so for me, what that brought to me was, well, I've got some sort of a small, at least, talent that I can write. And it's really more on the side of, yes, I want to write the book because what Natalie says is it saved my life. But if some of my words will help anybody else navigate through their stuff, then that's why I want to do it. So,
well, I would say for me, and I would put myself in the group of your average reader, I think what really resonates as you write your story is it's not just, hey, this is what I did. It's almost the walking conversation of you in your head. This is what happened, and then it was, hey, dumbass, you shouldn't have done that. And so you self-deprecate in the sense that I could have done A, B, or C differently. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we all relate. The exact situation may not be the same. The overarching scenario we can all relate to, but it's the after effect, and it's the, man, I should have done or I shouldn't have done that really makes it relatable.
Yeah, it wasn't planned that way by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Natalie, she didn't really change a whole lot of the wording, if at all, but she did make it very readable for guys like us that I don't really read that much either, which is, I mean, I love saying it this way, but it is frustrating when you become an author that a lot of other people want you to take their book. And I've got like 50 books at home that I haven't read because I'm like, I just don't, it's not that I'm not interested, but I don't have time. And so it wasn't planned that way. And when I wrote it, it was literally just me just regurgitating my career. That's pretty much as it turned out. And I guess just because of the way I wrote it, a lot of people were like, man, you're just straight from the heart kind of thing. And that was not really by design, just by luck, I guess. So,
well, and going back to what we talked about earlier, the important thing for me is you could have simply just written a book. Hey, this is a chronological account of my career, and left it at that. It's the equal component of here's the mistakes I made, but then, like I've said before, the last third of the book is you addressing this is the impact that it had on me, and the mental health component, which is the big part of what I think all of us tend to struggle with is we see horrendous trauma. Maybe not everybody's been involved in a shooting, but they've seen a lot of the trauma that you address in the book, and the importance of, if you're experiencing something, go deal with it. Reach out to somebody, ask for that. You even have a line in the book. It's okay to ask for help.
It is 100%. And you touched on this earlier. I mean, do you think that you're going to be shunned by your department? Well, and this is what I tell folks when I used to work off duty at some of the bars, they'd get kicked out of the bar. And I'm like, if you got kicked out, that means that they don't want you there. Why would you want to go back? I mean, clearly you're not wanted. If you're going to get shunned from your department, doesn't mean you're going to quit, but maybe you should go find a different detail. Or if you happen to work for a small agency and this is how they're treating you, it's probably not going to stop because, I mean, it sounds bad to say it this way, but the world's going to keep evolving. The bad guys are still going to keep doing their thing. If you decide that you want to continue on with this career, you're going to go through this again. And if you're not able to navigate it here, in a year from now or whatever, 6 months from now or 2 years from now, are you going to be able to navigate it then? So it may be time to start looking at, and I'm not at all ever suggesting that somebody just quit their career, but maybe just do like I did, take a step back and go, okay, I need to process what this is, figure out how I can help myself to make sure that I'm okay, my family's okay, and then I can take care of my citizens and my department or whatever else. So.
And so tying into your public speaking aspects and the book, what's your last piece of advice for those of us in the first responder community, or even the veteran community who have experienced trauma and addressing it?
Well, it's different for everybody. And clearly you can see I can talk. I mean, there's no question about that. So figure out your way. And, I joke about it all the time, especially when I'm up on the podium, when I talk about when you're driving through the McDonald's drive-thru and she asks you, does this complete the order? And you answer with yes, 10-4. You've been doing this shit too long. You need to take a step back. You really do. And that's fine, because guess what? Just like I said before, the bad guys are still going to be there. Whatever amount of time on, if you've been on a year, you take a month or two off, you're not going to forget how to be a cop. That stuff's still going to be going on. You're not going to lose anything. You can come back and be right where you were before. But figure out what your way is. Like for me, it started off with the public speaking, ended with writing the book, and it reignited with being, I don't want to call myself a professional public speaker, but I've been in like 12 different states and dozens of agencies all across the entire country. And it's very humbling to hear that, hey, we want to bring you out. Like I just got a call this morning from a guy from North Dakota. Hey, we want to bring you up and have you speak. Like, you want to pay me to fly halfway across the country to listen to what I have to say. That's huge, which works for Chris Hoyer. It works great for me. Figure out what that is for you, whatever it is. If it's writing the book, and this thing, even if you write a book, don't think of it as, the big picture. You know what I mean? When this thing started, it was literally just me getting all my stuff out of my system, off my chest. Turned out that I met the love of my life, who ended up making it something very special. It could be just you getting your stuff out, and it's only for you. You can keep that stuff close to your heart. It doesn't have to go to print. It doesn't have to be published. Just hang on to it. But now for me, because this thing is a physical thing I can hold in my hand, this is forever something I can pass on to my kids and my grandkids and whatever else. Because a lot of people don't like public speaking. I get it. But if you feel like you've got a story that needs to be told, think about that avenue. Think about a possibility of, you don't necessarily have to be up on the podium talking to 300 or 400 people at a time. You could just be an advocate for a small group of people. Hey, you've got, 3 or 4 guys from one department that are suffering. Like in my case, we got 6 shooters on our scene. Those guys are all suffering the same types of trauma. You go in there as an advocate because, hey, I've been through that before too. I understand this, and you can go in there and talk to them and say, hey, this is what worked for me, and you take it on board for whatever it is. So.
And we've all been in those situations, and we all know it from our careers. Nobody wants to be the first one to speak. But once that first person speaks, the dam's cracked open and everybody's talking. And so going back to what you said, if you've got a story, who knows who it's going to help unless you just get up there and tell the story. And somebody in that audience is going to take something from your story and go, here's what I need to do.
I couldn't agree more. And I say it every single time I speak. If I only reach one of you, then I'll go through the whole entire thing all over again. And I take it even a step further that it's never been about the money, because I don't really get paid to do this, which is why I got to go back and start working all over again, which is okay. I don't have a problem with that. But I feel, me personally, I've got an obligation to share what I know, because if it just saves one, then it's all worth it. So.
Well, I wish you the continued success with the public speaking. I look forward to reading the second book, and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I'd love it. I can't wait to come back and maybe do a second episode with you.
Sounds
Great.
good.
So, thanks.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.